Today we have Tomoko Yoneda speaking with Melanie Pocock. They are in London and Birmingham, respectively, and I will just introduce them briefly. So Tomoko Yoneda is a photographer, and she is currently having a solo show at the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation in London. The show is called Faultlines, and it's on until the 16th of June. And I hope that many of you may have already seen it. Perhaps you came to the opening when we said we'd be having this talk. But if you haven't seen it, I very much hope you will be able to come and see it. And perhaps if you're coming to Photo London, which takes place in mid-May, you could drop by the Daiwa Foundation and see this exhibition. So as you can see in this slide, Tomoko has a very wide experience of exhibiting all over the world, of course, at a number of exhibitions in Japan, but also in other places, including Vienna, San Francisco, Shanghai, Taipei, London, of course, Ukraine. And in particular, there was a big retrospective of her work held in Spain in 2021 with a monograph. And she'll be talking today to Melanie Pocock. So this is Melanie. She is the Artistic Director Exhibitions at Icon Gallery in Birmingham, which has a proud history of introducing many Japanese artists. Before she moved to Icon, she was at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in Singapore, where she curated over 60 exhibitions. And she also does a lot of writing, contributing to catalogues and monographs and writing essays and articles and reviews for a wide range of magazines and newspapers and so on. So I'm just going to show you the timeline. That was my greeting. And Tomoko and Melanie will have a discussion for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open it for a Q&A session. So please think of your questions, but you are welcome to do things in the chat before we get to that point. So over to you, Melanie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to the Daiwa Foundation team again. I'd also just like to say thank you so much and to Tomoko for this opportunity also to delve back into your work after I had the privilege of getting to know it better through this exhibition that I curated in Singapore called Native Revisions. And it was looking at history, how the camera photography can really open our eyes to what lies hidden within the landscapes that we take for granted and know. And Tomoko's work resonated so strongly with this theme. And ever since then, we've had this great dialogue. So it's wonderful to be, working together again for this show. I have about 6 official questions for Tomoko, but I'm hoping that we will veer off the designated path also at points to reflect on things that occur to us during this discussion, but also to note for people attending, what we've attempted to do with the order of questions is to take you a bit through the exhibition if you haven't already had the chance to physically visit it at Daiwa. And so as our starting point, if we go to the first slide, this, in some ways, extraordinarily, that is your first show in London for more than 10 years. That's right, Tomoko?
That's right.
And as we both know, London is actually a really important place for you. It's where you did your further studies at the RCA and settled in East London, where you're based today. But I'd like to mention this point as we start, because I think a lot of people, also because of the subject that you're often addressing in your work, Japanese history, imperialism, East Asia more broadly, and the geopolitics of that region. But London is where you are very, very rooted. And in many ways, we can also understand, I think, your very different approach to Japanese history, almost from an external perspective, because of the fact that you are often physically outside of Japan and having that distance. London has meant to you and your practice. and also in relation to this very early work, which forms the starting point in the exhibition, two prints from your series Heat, one of which we are seeing on screen. Yeah, London.
Actually, I studied photography in America first. Then I came to London, as Melanie knows, and maybe some of the audience will know. When I came to London, I think it was the height of recession, and many of the actually turmoil of first Iraqi war, and quite sad feeling in atmosphere being in London. And when I graduated from Royal College, and I was looking for the place to live, and then I wasn't sure what kind of work I want to produce. And I think my work at the time, or this work when I produce, I think it's not a specific sort of English aesthetic kind of way.
Mm.
I think some of the essence in my work is come from America as well, because I studied in Chicago, and the landscape in American landscape, the big cities, high-rise building, big boulevard, straight line and horizontal lines. So formalistic approach I have done. Then, so when I moved to the a cheaper location to have a studio, at the time, I mean, people wouldn't understand nowadays, but Shoreditch was the most sort of rundown place at the time. So early 90s, the mid 90s, yeah, before 2000. So many of the places are vacant, empty. And when I went to the state agent with my friend looking for the place, and it was a rundown studio that we have to do build proper studio and the dark room, etc. Then I felt all the empty spaces, and I knew my grand building as well, when I think commerce and lots of trade was going on before war. That England was devastated by World War II, the bombing raids and Blitz and things. And still, when I was there, I could see some empty spaces. And the can I say? Oh, so many of the empty spaces, some of the council estate, which was going to torn down. And the obviously people used to live there, and they had a family, and I wanted to see some kind of traces of the people who lived. So we anonymously exist as maybe we don't have, the made a mark in the history also, but an individual, our stories are important. So when see some of the spaces, I see, I mean, particular ones like a Heat series, nothing there, but maybe lights the same, so lights coming from the window, the same. And the heat marks left on the wall, which tells that the times, the past. So it's like resonant and the traces of the history, but we don't know who lived there. So
it's, hearing you also talk about these works and the mixture of almost what feels like a portrait of it, as you mentioned, an anonymous individual who we can imagine, and the social history around, again, the East End of London. But then equally, as you were referring back to, your time in America and this interest in the formal configuration of photography, and that intersection, if you like, between form and narrative. And I was just thinking, even with the title of the work, Heat, because actually what you're seeing on the wall is like overexposure, heat that's warped the paper, that's stained it. And even that idea of exposure relating, of course, to photography and, you know, the nature of how those images are produced. And also, just to make the point evident in the tones of the photograph, but it's a silver gelatin print.
Mhm.
And this has also consistently, from the very beginning of your career, been an important medium within photography. Would you mind actually sharing just specifically on that silver gelatin, you know, because it is unusual as a medium also for contemporary photographers to be returning to.
I see. Well, when I was studying photography, first medium, first with the film was black and white. And you hands-on, you process yourself on little equipments and there, you know, you do prints quite simply. You know, you can have a lead right to, you know, prints. And when I said I study color photography, so later you're going to show color too. But when I say the quality of the capturing the lights is more evident in black and white, because it's only black and a gray tone and the white, gradual white, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you see more of the forms rather than other informations coming to the color.
Mm-hmm.
And these series, topographical analysis and the heat triptych, all shot in 5x4 cameras. So it's quite a big negative. And when I take photograph, I have to set on tripod. You can't really carry around, you know. You have to know what you are going to take photograph.
Mm.
Then it's amazing, all the details. Actually, these works at the Daiwa I'm showing is 120 centimeter tall. So it's, you saw it. It's like almost like, can I say, actual one-to-one kind of real, you know, wallpaper. Probably had it in a room of the family used to live. So that is quite amazing. I try to accomplish in these photographs.
And you're right, you know, the scale of these, particularly at Daiwa, it almost seamlessly blends in. You could think it's an extension of the space, and yet takes you to quite another. But you know, also thinking about silver gelatin prints, you know, we have this quality we associate with them with history, you know, and looking back at the past. And if we move to our next slide, this leads us nicely onto perhaps what we could say is one of your most well-known series, which bears the title of Scene. And in these photographs, you are revisiting sites that were somehow significant in how the Second World War played out. Many of these relate to East Asia and Japan, and this kind of matrix that relates to also longer histories of colonialization and war between Korea, Japan, and China. And in all of these images, what often appears is what feels like a very joyful or innocuous, you know, lovely, almost that cliche of the pictorial landscape. And yet, when we read the captions, the titles to these works, we realize that actually within this landscape, there lies a darker history, a geopolitical history. And in the exhibition, we have, as we see on screen, Wedding, which whilst on our boat going off romantically into the distance with a couple who have just married with their family witnessing, it is also the border that divides North Korea and China. But alongside this print, we have another image in the Scene series. And if we move on to the next slide, I believe we should have that here. It is the image of the crash site of a B-29 aeroplane in North Yorkshire. And we we spent a lot of time talking about this image in preparing for the show, and I realized with hindsight that it feels the only image in this series where you are directly evidencing the remnants of conflict. Like actually, when you're looking into this image and you see the broken bits of airplane, it's very strong and it's very literal in that way, that where the other images are kind of couching these allusions to the past, and deflecting almost your gaze with something of the present, which is, it doesn't feel like conflict at all. And I know that this image was also important to us for this show because it's the only one in this series that has been taken in the UK. And so my question to you is partly about the significance of the B-29 aeroplane, because we know this has a longer significance and history in your work. But yeah, also the fact this image was taken in the UK and how that sits alongside the broader Scene series for you.
Yes. Can I say? Well, this was shot in 2015. So we're going to have this year is 80th, isn't it? After the World War II. So this was done after 70th year. And I didn't know there was the crash site or B-29, which when I look into and the research, that was an airplane who went along with the planes who did the test on Bikini Atoll Islands for the atomic bomb test. Then, yeah, I've been like searching for the airplane of like, I don't know, ghost sites, so sort of like images of B-29, which my parents witnessed when they were little in Japan, coming over to, it could be a countryside, or it could be Tokyo or Kobe, Akashi, Kochi, where my mom and dad are from. And it was the image which I haven't witnessed. Of course, I wasn't there, but I was looking for to see what is the traces about, what's there about. I wanted to witness. Then there is a crash site I found. Then there is a connection to atomic bomb, which happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And those tests heavily done in pre-war and after the war, and still goes on sometimes. And the now, the age of, still we so scared of an uncertainty of how, mass destruction of the weapons could be used. So, so this was the, I guess, as you said, and I have been doing the scene, which the scars you don't see, but the daily life carry on. But this particular ones are yeah, very different to other scene series. But I think around this time as well, there was like there's airplane crash and mistaken passenger plane as a warplane, and the little border lines and all, yeah, calamity, all the yeah, disaster happens. And yeah, I mean, this happens on top of mountain, so they couldn't carry down, so it have to be just what it's called the age, and still there's yeah.
Actually, you mentioning all these, recent incidents because of, again, the wars that are going on right now in the world and how we think about borders. And this actually takes us to the exhibition title, Faultlines, which on one level, we were also very much thinking about Japan and the significance of geological fault lines with earthquakes and all of the fault lines that run through Japan, and that are the root cause also of some of the catastrophes that you then deal with so poetically in your works in the aftermath. But also we do tend to think of geopolitical borders, particularly, nowadays or at times like the Second World War, as fault lines. These are the fractures in our geopolitical landscape which cause such conflicts, a country's governments fighting over borders and land and territory. And yet in the air, a bit like the sea, they're sort of invisible. I mean, on land, we construct, borders as such, but even then, as we don't have an image, but just to describe, we also have some works from your DMZ series, which are taken on, still the, let's say, temporary border between South Korea and North Korea. It's sort of an indefinite situation of ceasefire. And because of that, there are areas that have fencing, but then there are others that are just sort of landscape. And in one of the images we have in the show, so poetically, you capture this just visible remnant of barbed wire that encircles a flower, so again, this unsuspecting, quite conflictual feature that's in the landscape. But I was also thinking about what you were saying with anniversaries and the fact that this image that we're looking at here was taken in 2015. You obviously had in mind, as we are all collectively in society often reminded at collective moments of remembrance, commemorating the end of war. And I thought that would actually take us nicely onto our next slide and next image, which is a new series which you're working on. And this is with another anniversary in mind, 30 years after the great Hanshin Awaji earthquake, which also for you has a very personal significance because it's the area where you grew up. That's right.
Yes, my mom is my parents next city, Akashi, and Akashi suffered from the earthquake.
And in this series, you are taking portraits of people who were born on the day of the earthquake, in the midst of, this turbulent moment. And I also want to remark here that it's your first series dealing with portraiture. When you've done other images, it's perhaps the portrait has been metaphorical with objects or landscape that's represented, but here we see a figure and they are gazing back at us. And I find this a really astonishing new development in your works. I'd love for us all here to just hear more about this turn to portraiture for this series and why.
Yes, I have the series called A Decade After. So 10 years after the Kobe earthquake happened in 1995, I was invited to deal with what earthquake was and how people would deal with the scars or, regeneration, or everybody has a different kind of, feel to when the bigger disaster happens. Everybody has a different kind of feelings, but some people say it's a regenerated and the big, you won't see much of the what was behind. So when I did the work in 2005, a decade after, so I had a show in Tokyo with the Scene series, and the curator came from Kobe, and he said, Tomoko, we having the exhibition of a Kobe earthquake, Hanshin Awaji earthquake, and said, you won in Japan at the time, but you are from there, and how could you do work for the theme? And I said, yes. So at the time, it was only 10 years after. So when I went back, I see something oddness of, new building. It was some of the community there and, houses, old houses there, but it's some, plot of land, it was erased and just a flat land. And some of the places what just bulldozer down and was a new road built and all the houses look very similar, like a model, model housing kind of thing. So I took photograph, I deal with what it looks like, but what is a scar maybe behind left. And there is a quite I show quite a lot of this photograph. There is a river and the building riverside used to be a temporary housing build. So the people who lost the house, and there is a regeneration that new housing always you see very far away. So that's I heard a story, and I had a navigator, people navigate me. It's the it's called volunteer people who help. And they told me there's old people who used to have a community, but they lost, but they are sent to quite far away beyond the highways. And so when I look at, I was like, oh, I have to take this photograph. I was just going around before the it was a preparation stage. And when I set up, when I go around, sorry, there was a little boy in the middle of the on the river, and he was just about to step on the water. So it's like a first decisive kind of and step on it. So I thought it's like the photograph of my wedding photograph. So it's see something going move forward. I thought, oh, maybe there is some kind of little hope, even though the landscape has some big scars and memory still there and the struggle. Then okay, then I didn't do any work dealing with earthquake. Then this year's 30th anniversary of Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake happened. Then I was approached again to do some work about earthquake. Then 30 years is quite a long time. And many people maybe left from where the area it's earthquake happened, or and still 30 years is a very long time, but still I hear the story. Obviously, if somebody lose some kind of effect in their family, lost a child, or the completely different coastal history, coastal life they have to take on, which they didn't expect it. Then it's still a sensitive issue to how to deal with healing, and think about how to preserve the memory of what happened. I thought about it very hard, and but so I thought maybe the portrait of the people. Then I found out, even though it's horrific day when earthquake struck, so many people, have to go into the emergency or couldn't go to the emergency. People have to be pulled out from the, crushed houses. But there was some people were born on that day. So the doctors and nurses trying to save people's lives. And also they were trying to, pull the new life to the world. Then I thought I want to meet them and approach some of the people which I found, and I got help. And yeah, when I saw them, they 30 years old on that day. And Melanie, you have a baby, and when you see the lives, years pass by, when you see your kids growing, and you see, oh yeah, okay, it's been 1 year past, 2 years past. So I thought taking photograph of the people who were born on the day and become 30 years old. I thought that signifies the past, the time has passed, this period, length of time, as well as they're okay, they're here. So a kind of hope, and I wanted to show the length of time. And of course, some of the children who was born on 30 years ago, of course, they have some kind of, can I say, no, of course, but some people who have, can I say, couldn't vocalize, their birthday, because they know, that's the day we have to, we do, it's a sad day for what happened, and some of the people who have, scars and sad history too. So yeah, but their mothers and fathers, well, they were, very affected by the earthquake as well. They were survivors too. So I wanted to celebrate and memorize, and I want to, can I say, so celebration of life.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's a beautiful portrait, and for all the reasons that you've mentioned, in the midst of this catastrophe, there was hope, there was birth. It's the ultimate contrast with an event that for so many people signaled death. And it really carries me on to also thinking about some other images in the exhibition that have this kind of poignancy. And where, although we are dealing with traumatic, events, that there is a hope, there is a sense of peace, even with the trauma of the past, like sort of accepting that that's happened and this desire to move on. And even in this portrait, whilst there's a certain vulnerability that you've also alluded to, and for these individuals where their birth date to an extent feels a bit like a taboo, that they also incredibly resilient, and the elegance, with the posture of this lady who we're presented with, is so strong in a very understated way. And if we move on to the next slide, thinking about some of these other images where these are portraits of a kind. So we're not saying the individuals or any particular individual, at least in the case of chrysanthemums. But in the case of that image, we've also talked about the way that for you, it in some way signifies a family of three facing up to the loss and suffering following the 2011 earthquake and tsunami that hit Northeast Japan. So that's where that date is sort of tethered to. But then with Sadako's paper, Cranes of Prayer, here we have a very literal remnant of hope. And it's because I think I should let Tomoko explain the history of Sadako, but many people won't realize that this is actually one of the paper cranes that Sadako, this young girl who was severely affected by radiation after Hiroshima, is that, yeah. And in the hope afterwards, when she was suffering from leukemia, when she was in hospital, she had a mantra that if she could make 1,000 origami paper cranes, that by the end of that process, she might be healed. Enough time might have passed, and a miracle may have happened. But yeah, so maybe Tomoko, if you could just share a bit more about these two particular works, both made in the same year. Both dealing with very poignant and very human sort of vulnerabilities in the face of trauma, and yet two very also formally very different photographic approaches.
It's true. So yeah, so this was, I did an artist in residency in Japan, in Tokyo. So I had almost 1 year to be able to stay. So this I didn't have much sort of opportunity to stay for the long period, and I wanted to do thoroughly about look back on Japanese history. And what happened in 2011 of the earthquake and Fukushima, a disaster, then Hiroshima is quite near where I am, not quite near, but what I say is when I was growing up, is in a school trip or study trip, I go to Hiroshima to look what the effect of atomic bomb and then the peace, to think about, try to eliminate the nuclear weapons in the future. So always kind of atomic disaster and what happens in the war, or those memory and story was in me. And when the big earthquake happened in northern Japan in 2011, I was asked to go to Japan for the residency, but I didn't know at the time that the earthquake happened. So I delayed to go to Tokyo, so that when I went to Tokyo in May was just just 2 months afterwards. So I thought I was going to do about Japanese kind of modernization of history and what the problematic history which Japan has after the Meiji Restoration. That was a theme I was going to deal with. But because of what happened in the year 11th of March, I changed completely. So I wanted to. So these are portraits of the year, kind of say Japanese families or Japanese people, and what I felt is like a lost of what happened to Japan, that kind of thing, and okay. We're trying to sort of against, the nuclear disasters and the nuclear kind of, we were the kind of front, I think, try to vocalize, the trying to stop the disaster of nuclear disaster or war or any suffering. Then, Fukushima happened, and then we again have to sort of first-hand experience. So that kind of feeling I had when I trying to produce my work on 2011. Then I knew about the Chrysanthemum Flower Festival, which held every year around autumn in the shrines around in Japan, and it started from Japanese imperial families, kind of beautiful, showing everybody grows, specialists grows nicely, and they compete each other to get the awards. Then when I saw those photographs, the photographs of history and the imperial families and crest in Japanese passport has a crest as well. So they're like chrysanthemum crest. So chrysanthemum, so symbolize Japanese, kind of Japanese people. So so yeah, I took a photograph of chrysanthemum as the family lost feel of the year 2011. And and those white kind of head, it looks like the hair, but a Japanese traditional wedding, bride has a white kimono and a white hat, covers. So that's sort of like innocence, kind of. meaning to. So innocence, family, children, mother, father, and chrysanthemum in Japan or quite often used for the funeral flowers as well. So national symbols and sort of mourning and family, that all the symbolism I saw as I compacted and photographing one picture. And Sadako's, well, she had lots of cranes, paper cranes made of medicine wrappers, medicine papers, actually. Then when I saw this particular one, and she painted the beak in red and the very soft white beige kind of color, that for me, again, like a chrysanthemum picture, associated with bride's kimono, beige white, and the red lipstick. So I thought maybe, if, I say many of the, children or the girls want to be one day, maybe wear, grand white kimono to get married, or, that kind of, I don't know, many of the symbolism, I saw it in this particular paper crane. So I chose one from among many.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you also refer to these signifiers of Japanese identity, sort of national identity, and moreover ones that have an older history than the 20th century, that relate to the imperial family, Japanese traditions of female dress and kimonos, and that stretches us or takes us back into a further sense of time. But yes, again, really coming at the sort of heart of a Japanese also sensibility, with the way I think you've taken these photographs. There's a kind of restraint as much as a humbleness in the face of nature, or and those they're very distinctly Japanese sensibilities, I think, as much in art as in everyday life. And moving on to the next slide, thinking about Japanese identity, but not in Japan, but as it was taken out during the imperial era, or other eras where the Japanese sort of expanded their footprint in Asia, and we have this series of images called Japanese house, and yet these are actually houses in Taiwan that were built in the colonial era, but then later occupied by members of General Chiang Kai-shek's government when they fled China and the Communist Party had taken over. Also, we've been discussing recently, there's been this sort of resurgent interest in this series of works, and you'll be showing them in some future exhibitions soon. And my first question with this series relates to, how did you come to know about these houses, actually?
Yes.
And why do you think that this history resonates so strongly now?
Well, yes. Yeah, I did many research about when I got a commission to do work in Taiwan, and I knew Japan had occupied Taiwan late 19th century till the end of the World War II. Then I thought how, because of my nature of work, my work, and I wanted to deal with what the relationship with Japan at the time and Taiwan. And when I researched, I didn't know the Japanese houses still exist in Taiwan. Then when I went around, and then I saw still some intact, and some abundant. And can I say, I see some of the I said era from Japanese era rest still, even though Quantum Army took over and those high-ranking officials lived there, but they changed it completely to kind of now a Chinese aesthetic way to the color red. And on this particular ones, when I saw this wallpaper, it's quite intriguing because these are, when I really look close to it, it's the Santa Maria, isn't it? The ship, or the Christopher Columbus of, great, crossing over to Atlantic. And so I thought that Taiwan has, the many history of somebody coming from outside because it's surrounded by, ocean and strategically, located. So I thought, can I say, occupying power, or whenever those, powerful people comes, I mean, they tend to build the elected statues of, sort of, to glorify what they've done.
Mm.
But in a personal space as well, right? It's their private residence, but still they carry their own culture into the foreign land. So I thought, Taiwan deal with the houses, which shows a history of they went through, would be a silence, a quiet kind of witness of the history in the private residence rather than statue or like in the public spaces.
And it's true in this image, we're really entering this forgotten or occluded kind of history, but that says so much, about the dynamics of colonial invasion and the changing of hands, and how that all becomes very blurred in this situation with, the multiple occupants over time, and even occupancy. We talk about domestic spaces, houses being occupied, but it's also the verb that we use for powers that come in and take over and occupy other countries and nations. And coming back to this also idea of delving into histories that aren't so readily available for us as a wider public. And I really sense also in your work this strong sense of responsibility to bring these to the surface, but not in a didactic way. Again, always in a very subtle and very restrained and specific way. It's these much bigger histories, but that somehow boil down to this microcosm of an interior or an object. And I think this brings us nicely to my last question, which also more or less brings us physically to the end of the exhibition, which is a presentation in Daiwa's ground floor library, where we have one series, photographic series, Between Visible and Invisible, which one of the images you see there on the left of the screen. And these are silver gelatin prints of texts that were somehow personally significant to intellectual or historical figures of the 20th century. In this case, Freud, with those very recognizable round spectacles. And then to the right side, a video piece, which is the newest piece in the show. So we start the exhibition with one of your earliest pieces. We're now in the present with The Gaze of Soldiers. And it's a short film, but that centers on photographs taken by American journalist Agnes Medley of Japanese soldiers who were captured by the Chinese military in the Second World War. And in that process, their allegiances started to shift. And I wanted to talk specifically here just about that process of handling some of this material from the past. You know, you as a photographer, I'm sure there are many photographers among us here today in the audience, and that often difficulty or in accessing certain documents, but I also for people here would really like to emphasize that and this is something that is deliberately layered between visible and invisible, but the spectacles that you see are actually the spectacles worn by that person, and Tomoko has taken pains to actually get the permission to hold those spectacles to then take your photograph. And I think there's so much integrity to that process. And I'm really curious as to why it matters to you so much, that very intimate relationship to historical material where you as the photographer are actually also handling it, in these works that we're seeing, and we see you handling it at least in the gaze of soldiers.
I think throughout of my other series, and you've seen, and the landscape also, I think I want to witness, I want to be in a particular location or particular object, the person who wore or the person who read. When you're handling, you see even though how great they are, or how praised in the history, or how condemned in the history, they were like us. They are similar to us. Glasses, Freud glasses, very tiny, small. And the books, small, and so that scale of, I think that the object and through the lens, and that's the, the camera has a lens too, and the camera needs a lens, or my method, I need a lens to take photograph. So the lens become like window or some kind of filter of yourself. I wouldn't, tell you how to look at these photographs, but individually, your own lens, your own, eyes to look at my photograph, and I give you some of the clues. So everybody's different from how they grow up, or nationality, or how you look at the world, or so I'm interested in something between. This is not the answer. Something invisible images, which everybody creates their own, inside of the head, which I cannot see, but that maybe that starts discourses and conversation. That's I'm interested in. So,
and also what you were just saying about feeling this need to be witness, it made me think about how often photography and photographers, as bodies and people on the front line or involved in documenting conflict, are often criticized for this voyeurism and the dynamic whereby, oh, instead of taking an image, you actually could have been doing something to help, or, actually being in the moment. And there's something very ethically fraught actually about the photographic image in those contexts. And I find here, in your own way, with what's possible, you really are always trying to be a part of that history, and in a way that feels very authentically empathetic, and really goes against that perception, I think, of photography, in a lack of sensitivity in these contexts, which is really heartening, and it makes these histories human. and relatable for all of us, I think.
I think sometimes we become insensitive and we don't have the imagination. We don't need to, the witness, the word I use, it's not witnessing actual events, but kind of trying to understand. That's to imagine what would have been like. That's the, even the history or some the incident happened in the past, but it can happen now, or it's happening too. It's not your, it's not just neighbor's problem. It might be, so the imagination and the understanding, the compassion, that all those kind of thoughts into my work.
Well, I think that's a good note for us to end at least our official dialogue on. Thank you, Tomoko, for all of those very generous responses to my questions.